Hi. Welcome to my third and final chapter of my three-part introduction into Population 1. This chapter will be about teamwork and communication. So what I'm going to be covering in this chapter are things like reviving, ghosting, callouts, and team synergy. So for the first topic to cover, we're going to talk about points around how one should revive their friends. This is a pretty important one since not only is it an individual skill that can be practiced and bettered, but it's also going to define the success of which your team can survive a knockdown and still come back to take the win. Let's first address the revive mechanism. As you know, in order to revive someone, you simply open your inventory menu and select the health cross symbol, and this will pull up your paddles. Then you simply rub them together to charge them. However, the manner in which you do this will impact just how quickly the paddles charge, and in the heat of it all, every single millisecond counts. So for me, the best way that I've found to charge the paddles as quickly as I can are large and smooth, deliberate movements, basically two large opposing circles. And while you're charging, you'll notice a blue charging meter pop up at the bottom of your screen. And you should use and watch this in order to judge whether your actions are actually pushing the charging gains to its limits. As far as I can tell, optimum charging speed is more a question of finesse rather than jerky movement and brute energy. I've included a timed clip of roughly how long it takes me to charge the paddles. Again, please feel free to post your times. While I'm pretty sure that there is a cap to the quickest possible charging time, I'd be very interested to know if anybody actually manages to push through this. I would say that it's important to know when and when not to revive. Firstly, the sound of charging the paddles is very distinct and can be heard from very far away. So if you're trying to revive somebody on the sly, you're going to want to gain some distance first. More often than not, if you're able to revive somebody, you should definitely take the opportunity to do so. The option to get another able-bodied player onto the field to support the fight should be paramount, I feel. However, striking the appropriate timing to do so can be tricky. If you find yourself in the situation where one of your teammates are downed, chances are that the enemy team are on the hunt and trying to finish your squad off. And this is where ghosting and becoming a scout for the squad can become very handy if done right. The down teammate can alert their friends as to the location of the enemy players through verbal communication. However, I've often found that this can become quite clumsy, and trying to explain the exact location of a person can take time, often too much time. Therefore, what I would suggest is using a combination of simple verbal comms as well as physically pointing at the enemy with your arm. Teammates will be able to see the ghost and see where the ghost is pointing, and can refer to their posture in order to get a pretty clear understanding of where the enemy actually is, without any crazy amount of often distracting chatter. So what I would suggest is, upon being knocked down, you immediately start your walk back towards your teammates and physically point at your enemies the whole time, but prioritizing being revived. And while the paddles are being charged, the ghost can still try and keep a lookout just to see whether somebody is trying to swoop in and finish them off. There is, yet again, a rather sneaky tactic that you can employ in order to try and get the upper hand when you have a downed teammate, and that is to fake a revive. As mentioned before, the sound of charging them paddles really does carry, and you can use this sound as a sort of decoy to lure your enemies to try and rush in and then get the drop on them when they do. I've seen this work multiple times now. However, again, I think a lot of players are starting to wisen up to this, and they tend to approach enemy revives with caution. Let's start off with probably the most important callout mechanic that's actually built into the game itself: location marking. The more aware you allow your team to be based on your effective communication and callouts and location marking, the more you actually empower them to have an advantage over the enemy. While you could take time to be very detailed and descriptive with the verbal callouts, these pings are super useful as it sort of cuts through all the time it would have taken to describe where you saw the enemy. So, in case you don't know, there are two main ways in which you can actually ping a location. The first and slower way is to hold down the ping button and select the icon that you wish to use. Then you just simply drag the icon to the visible location that you want to ping and hit the ping button again, or trigger. This method is particularly useful, I find, if you're either grouped with people that you're not familiar with and you need to be very clear about your pings, or if you're grouped with people who speak a different language, for example. However, this method tends to take time since there are several steps to it. The second and faster way to ping is to simply point at the location that you wish to ping and tap the ping button, and the marker will immediately place. This method is much faster and is the only method that I use for pinging locations. The ping marker by default will be that sort of blue teardrop shaped one. But if you pull up the menu and choose a different one, every ping after that will be the one that you chose. If you need assistance in aiming your ping, just make sure that the weapon is equipped and either use the on-screen crosshair or the hollow sight in order to pinpoint your aim. One potential problem with this to highlight is when using pings, you can in fact be too accurate with the marker and literally place it directly on top of the enemy that you're calling out, and inadvertently concealing them from your teammates' view. Even the ping's trail that leads upwards towards the sky can get in the way. Therefore, I would say that it's pretty much always a good idea to just sort of ping the area or structure of interest and verbally call out the exact location. So you can say, behind this rock or in this building, for example. Plus, if you call out the enemies by the color that they're wearing, it will help your teammates spot them far easier, I find. And will also help the others know whether the enemy in question has been downed or actually has gotten away. And I guess on that note, strategically speaking, everybody on your team should be wearing the same skin for that advantage. It may seem obvious, but I'd still say it's important to point out that working together effectively as a team is the key to success. And that's often achieved by simply sharing loot and resources. You're going to want to make sure that you make use of your backpack, which is the icon at the bottom of your inventory wheel. I find that it's much easier and much quicker to drop items and will also allow for the dropping of ammo for your teammates. And remember, just like you, everybody has a preference when it comes to weapons. And it would be good, I guess, to actually know what your teammates' weapon preferences are. This is so you can keep a lookout for these particular weapons while you're in the process of looting for yourself, and then you can ping these items of interest for your teammates as you go. I would say that you should also consider actually picking the item up and bringing it to your teammates, as this is often much quicker than getting them to go out of their way to come and get it. And this, of course, goes both ways. If you find yourself in need of something, it doesn't hurt to call out for it and ask for it. If your teammates can spare the weapon or ammo, they'll give it to you.
I need a Seiko!
Personally, I always look around at my teammates' health and shield levels before guzzling either food or shield up for myself. Ideally, everyone on the team should be at the same level of shield and health to be at the optimum level of force as a team, one could say. And this, of course, is particularly important to remember right after you've successfully revived a teammate. I guess you should be prepared to immediately drop a weapon and the appropriate ammo if needed, seeing that your revived teammate is going to be without. And now, as for formations, now I'm not the greatest tactician, but formations must have their place when it comes to team effectiveness. Personally, I find that a combo of assault and sniping, close and distant, tends to be a pretty effective approach. The overview of the sniper at the back can tend to take advantage of mistakes made by the enemies in the form of overpeaking or coming out of cover, for example. and the other two that are on the assault can really pinch the enemy while maintaining pressure and putting out the damage. Not to mention that remaining slightly spread out will allow for a tactical retreat. Never be ashamed of a tactical retreat. Being able to pull back and revive your forces, looting up again, completely levels the playing field and gives your team another fighting chance for the win. And finally, I feel I should emphasize that regardless of how skilled one is at the game, and amongst all of your possible advantages throughout the rounds you may find, the support of your squad is by far the greatest asset you will have in the game. So don't neglect them. The more pressure that your teammates can exert on the bad guys, the more opportunity you will have to capitalize on the mistakes made by them, and vice versa. A simple example of this is if you're approaching an enemy from 2 or 3 different angles, they will be forced to divide their attention. So if you're the one that's currently being engaged by the enemy, that leaves an open opportunity for your teammates to assault. And similarly, if your teammates are the ones that are being engaged, don't let their efforts remain isolated. Tactically dive into the fray. And that's it from me for my 3-part introduction into Population 1. I truly hope that you've both enjoyed and found these videos useful. To follow up, I'll be making the obligatory short summary sort of top 10 tips video, but please do consider subscribing for all things Population 1, as this is a game that I plan to really get into. Thank you once again, everyone, and as always, I'll see you in there.